All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I think everybody can hear me okay, correct? No problem there. It seems almost loud from up here, but good. Well, first of all, just thank you so much for attending today. I know everybody's got a packed schedule and lots of great, fantastic things to go see and do today. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Ken Heller. I'm the Vice President of Technical Account Management over at Tanium. Had the pleasure and opportunity to work with so many different commercial and government organizations on projects that are primarily focused around IT asset visibility and understanding what's on your enterprise, what people are doing, where data lives, that information on a regular basis. So we're very excited today to be with you all and have an opportunity to kind of talk about AB375, which is also known as the California Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. Just out of curiosity, how many people have actually read anything about this so far? Anybody at all? Oh, wow, I get to be the one to show you everything you need to know about it for today. Fantastic. All right, this is going to be a little bit of an interactive session. I will occasionally ask a few questions. So here's the next pop quiz. How many of you actually live in the state of California? I love it. Just about everybody here does. I kind of assumed that, so here's the good news. This bill definitely applies to you because if you live in the state of California, this particular Privacy Act has a number of initiatives that you're going to want to know something about. You'll get to go through a series of slides today, and we're going to determine what the impact is going to be for you at work. But regardless of that, hopefully by the end of today's session, you're going to have a handful of things that you've learned about this bill, and you're going to get to understand your rights as a California consumer at a better level, in addition to understanding the impact on your organization at work. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of things. Whenever I do a presentation, I may be dressed like a lawyer today, but I have to admit I'm not a lawyer at all. I'm really an engineer at heart. I love engineering, I love technology, and I love talking about it, but most importantly, I love really working through how it impacts our daily lives and the ways that we can use technology to get better and better at things that we're doing across the organizations. Before we get into the bill, I want to talk a little bit about how did we get here? How did we get to a need for the AB375, the California Protection Act that we have? We all know and we live and breathe every day with the technology around us. It's proliferated so much that we walk around with these computer systems in our hands. We touch computers all day, every day. Our cars are computer driven. Everywhere we go, people want information about us. They're putting into these IT systems, and we're really struggling to keep up with the bad guys and human error in terms of preventing breaches. They continue to happen. So I've got a slide here, that's the slide that's courtesy of our friends over at Avast, where they actually made a list of the top 10 breaches of 2018. And when you look at the number of people that are affected, the number is quite large. It's huge, in fact. Now, we're very fortunate that there's really not any US government agencies on this year's list. Thank goodness that we're not in the top 10, but let's be honest, we're not in the clear. There was unfortunately far too many government agencies also included. They just weren't at the size and the magnitude that we see on this top 10 list right here. So what you're seeing is every single day it seems like we're hearing about another new breach. We're starting to have this real issue with trust with the IT systems that exist out there. We're really becoming almost immune to the daily news of yet another breach. I don't know how many of you have personally been affected by these breaches, but I probably have 6 or 8 different times in just the last 2 to 3 years where I'm well known to be on that particular list. The OPM breach was a government breach that I was certainly a part of, unfortunately, where my personal data was kind of spilled out there, but also the Yahoo breach and a number of them. So this particular act hits home for me personally because I know in several cases it's actually occurred to me, and I suspect the same for each and every one of you, where there's one or more breaches that have really come about and made it where we're a little less trusting when it's time to enter our data into a website. In fact, hopefully, when you go online now, and the people start to ask you questions like, hey, what's your favorite pet? What's your favorite hobby? Where do you live? What's your driver's license number? We're getting a little bit more leery of putting that information into a system without knowing where it's going. And then I want to talk about one of them that's on this breach because it really ignited a firestorm. It's the Facebook breach. It's also known as the Cambridge Analytica breach that we ran into as well. And so why is this one so special? And what happened here that hit home that made us all go, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? And the answer to this, in my humble opinion, is It felt so personal. I don't know about you, but I had pictures of my dogs on there, my family, my kids starting to walk. It's so much personal things that we had built into the Facebook sites. And then what you started to notice is that there were some questions around, hey, how long did Facebook know this was going on? And then they came out several times and said, oh gosh, we're so sorry about that, never gonna happen again. Or we changed the procedure here, we changed the procedure there on how that's gonna happen. And yet it seemed to happen over and over again. So we're starting to have a serious loss of trust with some of these organizations that are holding on to some of the most personal IT data that we have. It started to make us question whether or not Facebook knew and simply ignored it for their own profitability reasons. That's a pretty tough loss of trust. Then you throw in the Cambridge Analytica was using it for political reasons. Regardless of the side that you're on in the political parties, once you recognize this content is effectively being weaponized against us and our political beliefs, it just feels insanely personal, and we need to do something about it. I think, before I get off of this slide though, think about the organizations that you're in right now. If you're at an organization, how comfortable do you feel that you could have presented the same scenario that Facebook was in? As the organization gets larger and larger, you have parts of the team that start to share data with third-party trusted advisors. Maybe they're another government agency, maybe there's a commercial entity that you've agreed to sell data to and allow this two-way exchange of data. But as that gets bigger and bigger, how comfortable do you feel that you could have spotted a scenario where data is being extracted outside of the organization, it's being used in a way that maybe you didn't intend it to be, and you could potentially be in the news when there's a breach that occurs at that third-party organization and have to stand there and explain why and how that data got out there. And the unfortunate truth is so many organizations simply don't feel comfortable with that kind of a question being posed to them. They recognize it's a big challenge. And oftentimes it's not intentional, it could just be simple human error that makes a mistake. I mean, imagine how easy it is for some of the data systems, somebody go ahead and select the data, right-click, download, and they put it onto their workstation. It's sitting there. They take that home and they share that information off. And yet your company's potentially exposed. So the Facebook breach obviously really ignited a firestorm, in my humble opinion, with the California legislators. They knew they had to take action, and they knew they had to take action fast. So this is a bill that came about quite rapidly. It's the Privacy Act of 2018. It takes effect January 1st of 2020. So there's a little bit of time to act. Now, the legislators knew that they really couldn't go out and actually force you to prevent cybersecurity breaches. That's a little bit like telling people to not get in a car accident. Of course, nobody wants one. We'll do our best to prevent it, but certain things are going to have to happen. So what we sought to do was to find a way to create a way for citizens to be engaged in the process and have ownership of the data themselves, essentially enabling transparency as a way to improve the trust relationship between citizens and the organizations they interact with. So let's take a look at the key bullets of this particular Privacy Act, talk about fundamentally what it's trying to do. And throughout all of this, by the way, please feel free to stop and raise your hand if you have any questions. I'll be happy to do my best to tell you how this applies to what business that we're all in, of course. So the first is you have the right, as of January 1st, 2020, to know what personal information is being collected about you. So when you go to a website, they're going to actually have you obviously type in whatever data it is that you're collecting, or they may ask you in person. It's really regardless of how they collect the data. It could be over the phone, could be on the internet, could be text message, regardless of the medium. Whatever they're collecting, you have the right to know what personal information is being collected about you. They also like to see it done in categories. So the particular bill has provisions about categories of information and the fact that you have to track and log that as a organization when you're collecting data. Hey, there's personal information, it's health information, or it's driver's license type information, and really create these categories. You have the right as a consumer to know whether personal information is being sold or disclosed and to whom that is. And so I like to give that analogy. If you had, gone to an organization, let's say you go down to the car rental agency and they ask you for a copy of your driver's license, which sounds completely legitimate. If you're going to rent a car from somebody, they want to know that you have a valid driver's license and you have the ability to do that. But what do? They take down this information. Now imagine if they photocopied your driver's license and they chose to go around and for $5 a copy, sell that to anybody that wanted a copy of that. Wouldn't that feel kind of like an invasion of privacy? The downside is it happens all the time right now. Not that exact example necessarily, but organizations are collecting information about people that's very, very private, and they're selling it. We all know what's going on. It's not like it's something rocket science that I've just taught you today. We know what's going on. We've allowed it to proliferate, and when we see the breaches and the number of breaches and the frequency, we recognize something has got to change. And that's what this bill is really all about. So now you have the right, it's a legal law, the ability to go in and sell, illegal law, that's kind of repetitive, isn't it? It's a law now that you have the right to go in and say no to personal information being sold. So you can go to an organization, you can say, please tell me all the information that you have about me. Now the caveat here is they only need to share with you the information that they've collected from you. If they get data from a third-party source, they don't have to share that. But if you go to an organization and you ask them for this information, they have to tell you what they've collected from you, give you the categories of data. They have to then tell you whether or not they've been selling and sharing this information off to third-party sources. And you have the right to delete this information and the right to say no to the sale of this information, which is pretty powerful. So now I can actually go out to some of these organizations and say, please show me a list of all of my information. I can see that. I can make a decision about, yes, I'm okay with you having it, but you can't sell it. And we all believe that little opt-out button, but there really wasn't a lot of meat behind that one that happens in a lot of websites. And now you have a law that stands behind, it's a law. If they opt out of this information, you absolutely must opt them out of that. Not only that, but once you opt out, they have to assume you will continue to opt out for the next year, the next 12 months, and they don't have the right to ask you again to opt back in. So you can voluntarily do it, but they do not have the right to actually ask you for that opportunity to opt back in. So it's just kind of interesting from that perspective. The other neat thing about this is that if you choose to say no, you say fundamentally, I don't want to give you my personal information, they do not have the right to give you a different level of service or a different price. So when you think about your organizations that are out there, if you're collecting PII information, personal information about individuals, you have to give the same level of service regardless of whether or not they choose to opt in or out of those particular items here. Any questions so far on the general nature of this particular bill in terms of the key things that it's enabling consumers to have the right to do? And you'll notice I use the term right because when the bill authors put this content together, and we can show you the actual text of it, it's really not a long bill. I believe in total, which for the very few bills that I've read, it was about 30 some odd pages, which seemed quite short in all honesty. They use the term rights on a fairly frequent basis. This is now a consumer right that we have. So the next question is, does it apply? We kind of already established for the very first or second question that I asked everybody is that if you live in the state of California, we know at a very minimum, this applies to you as a consumer, and that these are rights that are going to be bestowed on you as of January 1st, 2020. So really next January, which is fantastic. So the next major question is, does this apply to you as an organization at work? And they put a number of parameters in here. So it's going to be a couple key things like, if any one of these key following things occur. Do you have annual gross revenues that are in excess of $25 million? Do you buy or sell for commercial purposes the personal information of 50,000 or more consumers, households, or devices? And or do you derive 50% or more of your annual revenues from selling consumers' personal information? And last but not least is that this applies for for-profit entities as of January 1st, 2020. So now before 2/3 of you get up and walk out and go, hey, this doesn't really apply to me as a government organization, recognize that this is just the first law of what's likely to be many laws related to consumer privacy. This was done in a very rapid basis, so they really tried to establish a core set of basic rights, get the bill pushed through, and get enacted as fast as they could. I think what you're seeing, if you take a look at Europe and the GDPR rules that they have, that really across the globe, these personal privacy issues are gaining a lot of momentum. And I believe California is simply a leader in the laws and the structure that we're putting around how we want to protect personal privacy. So even though this may not apply to your organization today, I really want to encourage you to think about implementing it anyway. And the reason is that in my humble opinion, it's the right thing to do. It's what our citizens want. It's what consumers want. It's what likely each and every one of us wants to do. Now, I have a very large engineering team that I work with, and I'm very fortunate and proud of the team that we have. And I can tell you this one question is typically the guiding principle I use for most things that I'm asked. So when somebody comes to me with a very difficult question, the first question I always ask is, what is the right thing to do for our customers, our citizens, if you will? And I find that guiding principle really provides the vision of where you really want to take an organization. It helps drive better decisions, and it really teaches and coaches the individuals around you that that's the guiding principle that you really want to implement. And I find we just simply we create better decisions than asking the first question would be, are we obligated to do it? Or what are the business metrics? Asking the fundamental, what's the right thing for your customers, simply drives a better outcome in my humble opinion. So again, I would suggest that you may not be required to do this, but it's the right thing to do, and I would heavily encourage you to do it. So are there fines? Well, of course there are, right? It's a new law, and they have to set a little teeth in place to enable you to have some repercussions from a government perspective of pushing back on organizations that would choose to ignore this particular bill. So let's talk about that. It will cost money in the amount of $100 to $750 per consumer per incident if you have a breach. That range is going to depend on the negligence that was involved in it and the willfulness of that, and that's going to be up to the Attorney General to make that decision. So the Attorney General, in the case of a Facebook, have come in and said, because you do business in the state of California, there's consumers that live in California on the Facebook websites, this would apply. If it was negligent in the sense that we believe it's willful and that you ignored that and you intentionally sold knowing it was the wrong thing to do, they could have applied a fine for up to $750 per consumer. When you think about that fine, if you take $750 and multiply that by the number of people that were impacted, it's greater than the market capitalization of Facebook as a whole. So that's a pretty steep penalty. And it's going to be a really large range, and of course that's on the extreme ends. They also have, and that's as a consumer, you can go and apply for your funds. There's a number of steps you would have to go through. It's a bit of a process. Really where the Attorney General is going to take, that's going to be up to them. Again, that's where I remind everybody I'm not an attorney. That's where you'd want to talk to an attorney about that type of information. But they also have given the Attorney General the ability to go fine up to $7,500 per violation for intentional breaches as well. So there's additional monetary compensation that the AG can go after for organizations that are willfully breaking the law here, in addition to the attorney fees that an organization is likely to face when these outages occur related to this particular bill. So it's pretty significant, in my humble opinion, the things that you're going to have to take a look at and do. So there's some things that we really need to do in order to start to prepare an organization. I'm going to run through a handful of them fairly quickly. I know that many organizations right now may not apply in this particular room, but a lot of organizations this does apply. And I would suggest this starts with leadership vision. I do a number of very, very large-scale IT projects every single year, and I would suggest that this always starts with executive buy-in or leadership buy-in at your organization. You really need to have individuals that will stand behind your team in believing it's the right thing to do, first and foremost, for our citizens. You need to set the tone. This is the consumer's data, that you're only the steward of it. The analogy I like to give is when you go to the bank, when you take money to a bank, just like your personal information, you're giving to them with the expectation that they're going to hold on to it. You know they're going to use this data in ways that they're going to enrich their organization, but at any given time, you want the right to ask them the balance, AKA, how much data do you have of mine? And you want the right to take it back from your bank at any time. So organizations need to shift from thinking that they own this data and information to understanding that it's the consumer's data and that they could ask for that back at any time. From a technology perspective, if you're an engineer, you probably kind of have a little groan in the back of your mind going on like, oh my gosh, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to change. And you're not wrong. There are a lot of things. You need to be able to track the data collection. You need to know the source of the data. You need to know where it came from. You know the categories of where that information's at. You need to be able to track who is using the data internally and externally. If you're sharing it with other business partners, you need to know that. If you're selling the data, you need to know that and be able to track that. Consumers are going to be able to ask for the data. You need to be able to tell them who you shared it with and who you sold it with as a separate list. Two separate tracking lists. One is the commercial use and one is the sharing with business partners. You need to provide that and the category of information that you shared with those individuals. You need to be able to delete the data from your systems. And you need to be able to audit whether or not that data is there, in the sense that you need to be able to track that you did actually remove the data and that someone didn't download that and put that on their laptop. I know that a lot of IT organizations are going to struggle with this particular portion of it, and that's why, and I apologize, I believe that one top graphic's a little whitewashed out. And so that's where organizations, and there's a plenty of them, where Tanium kind of comes into play, where we have the ability to go track and map the application dependencies. Because these systems likely live in things like databases, whether it's Access, SQL, Oracle, MySQL, all the different database types. You also have a variety of flat files that may exist on there, whether it's CSV files, whether it's spreadsheets, whether it's notepad documents. We have the ability to go search data at rest, to go look for PII information on there. And this is going to be a really big challenge because you're used to allowing folks to grab the data, drop it on their workstations, use it at will, and move forward with that. But there's going to be legal obligations for you to track and understand where that's at. And you're going to have a level of asset visibility on the endpoint that you've never been responsible for in the past. So it's going to be a big hurdle, and we understand the challenge that exists, and we'd love to help out organizations with that. Oops, a little too far there, here. So processes, you're going to have to change a number of the processes that you have. You're going to have to be able to search for data. You're going to have to be able to search for data at rest. You're going to have to be able to search for the data in the databases. And database systems are fortunately fairly enabled in terms of the ability to go integrate with that. But you're going to have to be able to respond to requests. So on your websites, whatever customer service and customer-facing interactions that you have, you're going to have to and be required to give at least 2 mechanisms for consumers to be able to reach your organization and request this information from you. And what I mean by that is they have the ability twice a year, and each of you will as a consumer, to ask for what data do you have on me, who are you sharing it with, both from a commercial selling and a just data partners. You have to be able to respond to those requests, which means you're able to go find that information, create that list, and respond back to them. You must give them 2 mechanisms to make those requests, whether it's a phone call, whether it's email, whether it's a website request, whether it's a walk-in in person. 2 or more request choices have to be made available for them. You have 45 days to respond to those requests and get that information back, or once again, those penalties and those fines will take effect on that. You also have to have the ability to delete the data. Does anybody here in the room, I'm kind of curious, feel comfortable right now that if you had to comply with this particular scenario today, you would have the ability to go out throughout your enterprise, your organization, and go, if I wanted to know where Ken Heller's personal information is, I could go search for that, and I could tell him where all of that data lives in their organization. And then I could successfully delete that. And to be fair, I doubt very many organizations, at least the IT team, would have any confidence that they could do that today. And so I would encourage all of you now to start having the conversation with your IT teams, your leadership teams, and the groups that are associated to your organization about how are you going to start to go down this process. We do this successfully as part of some of the cybersecurity initiatives that we do with a lot of organizations. We understand that oftentimes searching for data at rest is quite challenging. And so we get that these are going to be some really interesting processes that you're going to have to put in place. It's not a trivial task. If you wait until it's mandated for every single organization, I suspect it's going to be quite challenging for each and every one of you. So I encourage you to really begin to have those conversations now. Questions so far? All right, so one of the individuals that I find fascinating is the Salesforce.com CEO, Mark Benoit. He's a fantastic speaker. If you ever had a chance to listen to him speak, he's very visionary in a lot of areas. And it was a while back where he had a fantastic quote where he says that California's new privacy law could help with the crisis of trust that exists between the tech industry and consumers. Our customers' data belongs to them. It's their data. And I find it fascinating because if you know Salesforce.com, you'll understand that this particular law is going to apply to them immediately. And it's going to be a very large task for them to engage in this process and be able to actually provide this information themselves. And they understand that a lot of the customers and the folks that are using their product are going to go through the same challenge of how in the world are we going to set these processes up in place? How are we going to make sure the data is where we need it to be? And how are we going to do it? And despite the huge challenge it's going to be for his organization and the huge cost, he recognized the pivotal shift. And the pivotal shift is it's a right of the consumer because it's their data, not the data of the organizations that are collecting the information. And when you walk out of today's room, I hope that's the major takeaway that you get, which is that we're seeing a very, very large shift in the industry, both from a government and a commercial perspective, that the data is the right of the consumer. It's their data, they own it, it's their right to have access to this information. So the real million-dollar question for each and every one of you in the organization is, how are you going to enable consumers to get access to this data? What are the steps that you're going to take? How are you going to get access and control of this information? And how are you going to do it at a pace that makes our constituents, our customers, our citizens comfortable with the data that you have? And in short, it's the right thing to do. I believe every one of us believes in that. So we just need to find a way to make that happen at the organizations that we're in and start to expect that as a right. Any questions? It's really all I have for today. I know it's a lot of information and maybe it applies to each and every one of your organizations. If you have questions on it, my name is, again, Ken Heller. I'm the Vice President of Technical Account Management for Tanium. You can always email me at ken.heller@tanium.com. And of course, when you walk out of here, we have a little booth in the back corner. If you'd like to get a demonstration of some of the visibility control mechanisms that we have for data at rest, any application dependency mapping needs and initiatives, we're happy to show that to you today. Hopefully you didn't get too much marketing in what we're doing today, rather just some good information about the new acts, how it applies to the things that you're doing as a consumer, and how it's likely to apply to you very soon in every single organization across the country that we have, of course. Thank you so much for your time today. Do you have a question, Tim?
Yeah, actually, this is a very small group, so it's pretty intimate. And I just want to ask, because I see it looks like Lewis from the city of Riverside. Yes. Yeah, I'm just going to ask you, because I'm not a plan, I'm a team, but we're in a small group here. It seems like there's a few folks here from municipalities, state, local, right? Yeah. I mean, are you finding that, like, that's kind of, do you see that kind of urgency coming where, hey, it may not be monetary fines to government agencies, but there will definitely be some kind of repercussions? I mean, like for a couple of my customers, it's an issue of you might not receive federal funding for some of your departments, or you might not receive funding. I mean, I'm just asking because we're such a small group, are you seeing those things as well? And I'm sorry, I know you're just your name and where you're from.
From the healthcare agency launch.
Okay, awesome.
And we were always scared of being audited. And
yeah. Audits are rough, aren't they? Yeah. How do you get visibility into it? And I I think this regulations, like we mentioned, I think it's coming for government agencies too. It's just a matter of how long it takes for that to occur. There's such a groundswell. So we get the challenge of auditing's a huge one. And yeah, it's tough. Other ideas? I think, Tim, it's a great question about.
It's relatively easy to control the data in the database, SQL Server or any of them. It's the people at their desk who download the data that is going to be the challenge for most of this.
I love it.
It's, you can control who gets what database. You read it, write it, it's relatively easy for the DBA. You can't control somebody sitting at his desk downloading people's information.
But as Ken was mentioning, when you kind of talked about, with the data all over the place, that's another thing that I notice in government is just because you have a lot of legacy data, and this goes, for years and years, and people change, technology change, you have all of these data silos, and so you need technology that can rather, basically split and expand to be able to get into the nooks and crannies and see all of the silos at once. Would you not agree, Ken?
Yeah, so it's fascinating because, and you hit the nail on the head of why one of our modules, our most recent module, is a module called Reveal. And what it does is it looks at data at rest. So we have to go in and look at things like your flat files are sitting on a desk for PII type information and alert when you find it. Because I fully agree with you where the database infrastructure and systems that are out there, they're designed for you to put front-end forms on it and to track that information. When I think of the database itself, what I care about are things that are connected and integrated with that database and sucking data out, and do I know of all of them? And so we want to look at that application mapping, and then I got to go look and I audit for anybody that may have downloaded that data and left it at rest. That to me are the two big hurdles that are beyond what I call the blocking and tackling. Of course, you have to put interaction forms up for your citizens to be able to engage you with. Of course, you have to track when data comes in. You have to extend that database with additional fields about where it came from and what the categories are. So when the query comes in, you can provide it. That's actually just easy blocking and tackling to extend the fields. Not new science, where the data at rest is much harder, and tracking the application dependencies is much harder from a pure technology perspective, in my opinion. Other thoughts or comments on that, or just out of curiosity?
It's a small group, so I figured.
Yeah.
Rarely you get to kind of interact with this. I mean, is this obviously the people who I'm sorry to pick your name, but you're obviously saying, where was your what drew you into this section? Because I'm just kind of curious what you look forward to.
So we're at Orange County Data Center, so the thought is actually we have a privacy officer and see what your laws. And any data that came through that contains a certain keyword, she will want.
Yourself?
I work for the San Diego County Office of Education. We're mostly, we're big on FERPA, but since we collect other data, especially like what happened with San Diego Unified School District last December, we are just trying to institute more data privacy, figured if I had better handle on what the app.
That's awesome.
Perfect.
Thanks everybody for attending, by the way. So it's a new space, and I think we're all trying to get ahead of it, and we're trying to work with everybody as well. Sorry, Kevin.
No, that's perfect. I think, like I said, we're kind of at that Q&A section now, in case there's any other questions that we have. Any other comments or thoughts on it? We're all set. I think we're done just 5 or 6 minutes early, but I want to thank you all for attending. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event here in San Diego. I know I don't get to come down to San Diego quite as often as I will. It's a beautiful city, and I really appreciate the event coordinator for setting all this up. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.